go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar series for the Community Wildfire Preparedness and Mitigation Division. My name is Kara Garrett, and I'm the moderator of this whole series. The webinar today will last about 30 minutes and will be recorded. Please type any questions into the question and answer portion of the screen, otherwise known as the Q&A portion of your screen, and we will answer those as quickly as possible. After our featured speaker has completed their presentation, we will be holding a question and answer session. If you have any questions after the webinar has concluded, we will be providing contact information for the program to allow you to reach out to them directly. All webinar documentation will be, including the PDF of the PowerPoint, will be on our website at that link that I put into the chat. And should you encounter any issues, please do not hesitate to give me a call at 916-201-5539, or you can also send me an email at that email that is listed in the chat. And today's webinar specifically will focus on our strategic fire plan and unit fire plans programs. So I will now turn it over to our presenter, Deputy Chief Scott Witt, to introduce himself and share more information about the program. So take it away, Chief.
Excellent. Thank you, Kara. If you can advance to the next slide. So throughout the presentation, we'll have a handful of QR codes. So if you've got your device or want to do a screen capture so that you can get it at a later time, and I'll also show you where those point to. Next slide. So we're going to talk about four things today that all relate to pre-fire plans. We're going to start at the highest level with the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Action Plan and drill down all the way to the community level, the neighborhood level with CWPPs. In between there, we'll be talking about the 2018 Strategic Fire Plan for California. We'll be talking about unit fire plans. And then again, as I mentioned, down to the CWPP level. Next slide. So we'll start off by talking about wildfire and forest resilience action plans. Next slide, please. So the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force last year, almost 2 years ago, developed a forest resilience action plan. You can see the QR code linked to the plan. It's a statewide set of goals across all state agencies with federal cooperation and local landowners. And it was designed to restore the health and resilience of California forests, grasslands, and other natural places. It was designed to improve the fire safety of our communities, and it was designed to sustain the economic vitality of our forested areas. Next slide, please. It comes with four primary goals and a whole bunch of objectives associated with those four primary goals. The first goal is to increase the pace and scale of forest health projects. The second goal looks at strengthening community protection. The third goal looks to align all of the state's goals and to manage forests and achieve both the economic and environmental goals. And the fourth goal is to innovate and measure progress. You can see at the bottom of the slide that those are being implemented and achieved through 99 key objectives, and that's what we're looking to meet those four goals. Next slide, please. So that Forest Resilience and Action Plan is a very high level, broad look, as I mentioned, across all state agencies, all state departments, our cooperators. And now to drill down a little bit more, we're looking at our strategic fire plan. Next slide. The strategic fire plan is a Board of Forestry document. The Board of Forestry and Fire Protection is a sister board to CAL FIRE. The Board of Forestry doesn't oversee CAL FIRE. CAL FIRE doesn't oversee the board. We're in a very cooperative relationship with the board, and we have many, many overlapping areas of concern. The strategic fire plan is one of the board's preeminent policies. The board has adopted these plans since the 1930s and periodically updates those to reflect current and anticipated needs. And it does come, the authority from that comes from Public Resources Code, specifically PRC 4130. The Strategic Fire Plan has a couple primary points of focus. The first one is fire prevention and suppression activities to protect lives, property, and the environment. And then also for the natural resource management to maintain the state's forests as a resilient carbon sink to meet California climate change goals. And it also serves to kind of stress and improve habitat, specifically adaptation and mitigation as those changes occur over time. Next slide, please. There's a QR code link for the Strategic Fire Plan. It has 8 primary goals. Each goal listed here is meant to build upon the previous one. And saying that, any of the goals can be worked on at any time based on available funding and opportunities that arise. So the first goal is to identify and evaluate wildland fire hazards and the associated risks. Again, hazard is the likelihood of an event occurring, and risk is the damage that can occur from that event. The second goal is to promote the local land use planning process. The third goal is to implement those local, county, or regional plans. The fourth goal is increasing fire prevention awareness, knowledge, and action. The fifth goal is to integrate fire and fuels management practices with landowners. The sixth goal is to make those fire prevention activities actionable, identify, plan, and implement those. The seventh goal determines the level of fire suppression resources needed to protect those assets at risk. We sometimes call this a level of service. And the eighth and final goal is what happens after a fire. It's those post-fire assessments and programs to help a community that's been impacted by fire stand back up on their own. Next slide, please. So the two plans that I just mentioned, the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Action Plan and the 2018 Strategic Fire Plan, those effectively set the framework, and the next two plans are now occurring at the lower level, and this is how that work is going to be achieved, how those plans are going to be implemented. Next slide. So starting off a little bit with what our CAL FIRE unit fire plans are. CAL FIRE has 27 units. You can see those on the map on the screen. The smallest CAL FIRE units might only be a single county in size. The Mendocino unit is an example of that. And the largest CAL FIRE units can be 4 to 6 counties in size. The Sonoma Lake Napa unit, which also includes Solano, Yolo, and Colusa counties, is an example of one of our largest CAL FIRE units. Each unit's going to have many CAL FIRE stations, a dozen or more. It's going to have fire engines, crews, dozers, firefighting aircraft. It's going to have a prevention bureau, and it's going to include a lot of prevention resources like law enforcement. The unit fire plan reviews everything that was discussed in the first two higher level plans. And the goal is to analyze how to protect its local communities down to that county level, down to that battalion level from the damaging effects of wildfire. Next slide, please. So one of the primary goals within CAL FIRE is what our unit fire plans seek to achieve. It's CAL FIRE's mission of keeping almost all wildfires small and limiting the damage that they cause. And what that means from a statistical standpoint is that we want 95% of our fires to be 10 acres or less in size. To do this and to analyze this, we update our plans annually. And when we do analyze our unit fire plans, we have three primary things that we're looking at. First, we want to take a look back in time. We ask ourselves, why did the fire start? Where did they burn? Where did they spread to? What kind of damage that they caused? Because we know what's happened in the past is a good indicator of what can happen in the future. The next step in this planning process is to analyze our current situation. Look at our short-term weather conditions, our changing climate conditions. Look at where we are in our wildland fuels. Are we in a drought? Have we been impacted by snow, rain? Is there bug kill? What's happening to those fuels that can burn? We want to look at our assets at risk. We're talking about people, homes, our community, our infrastructure, what's at risk from wildfire. And we want to look at the level of service that we provide to an area. Essentially, are we meeting our objective? Are we putting most of the fires out when they're still small? And what's going on that's causing those fires to escape that type of control? After we look back in time and after we analyze our current situation, the next thing that we do is look to the future. What are our prevention efforts that we need to reduce the starts? What are the prevention efforts that we need to educate the community? A good example of that is it debris burns? And if so, how can we target a community to educate them on how to burn safely, or what conditions might warrant no burning at all? We look at enforcement. So if there are illegal burns, using this example, what can we do to educate and then ultimately enforce those fire safety laws? Looking into the future, what's our wildland fuel treatments? Where have they been? Have they been effective? What are we looking at for regrowth? And then finally, looking at staffing. Are staffing trends going to continue to support our containment efforts, or long-term, are there things that we can do as a department to alter that? Next slide, please. So drilling all the way down now to the battalion level within CAL FIRE. A battalion chief oversees a CAL FIRE battalion. We have about 125 scattered throughout the state out of those 27 CAL FIRE units. Typically, if you are within SRA, a CAL FIRE battalion is going to be about a half a county in size. It's probably going to have 2 to 3 CAL FIRE stations with a handful of engines, maybe a bulldozer. And to really have a cooperative relationship and an informed relationship, get to know your local battalion chief. That can be as easy as calling your local CAL FIRE station, letting them know where you live, and asking who your battalion chief is. That battalion chief wants to have local relationships. They want to know their landowners. They want to know their community. They want to know how they can help to mitigate fires, and they want that cooperative relationship in the community. The next thing that we're going to do is glance specifically at the fire plan located within Paradise, within the CAL FIRE unit, also abbreviated as BTU. Paradise, for everybody that remembers, suffered pretty significant damage from the 2018 Camp Fire. There were about 18,000 structures that were burnt. They're in the process of rebuilding right now. And what I wanted to illustrate with just a real quick glance is what that looks like. So on the right side of the screen, you can see our CAL FIRE unit fire plans. The Butte unit is highlighted towards the top, and the QR code that you see on the screen is how you access all of the CAL FIRE unit plans. Next slide, please. So this just happens to be 3 pages that I've pulled out of the unit fire plan and dropped into the slideshow. The first page would be the cover page. The next page is all of the fire prevention activities that are occurring throughout the unit. Unit fire plans are going to have maps and charts and data. And what you can see a little bit of is the map that would cover that portion, that battalion. And then finally, as you open up a unit fire plan, they're typically going to be 3 to 4 pages or more describing that battalion and those local activities occurring in detail. They're going to talk about fuels, weather, topography. They're going to talk about the population. They're going to talk about activities, prevention activities, fuel treatments that have occurred in the past. They're going to talk about things that are going on right now. And they're going to be lining out future projects, future goals as funding and staffing becomes available. Next slide, please. To kind of wind down the presentation, just to recap, I very briefly covered the 4 primary planning documents that we use within the pre-fire community. Again, our Wildfire and Forest Resilience Action Plan, our strategic plan, our CAL FIRE unit plans, and then now we're going to get into CWPPs. Next slide, please. So community wildfire protection plans, also known as CWPPs, can be down all the way to the neighborhood level. CWPPs were initially proposed, rolled out with the 2003 Healthy Forest Restoration Act, also known as HERFA. And those are plans that are developed collaboratively. They identify and prioritize fuel reduction projects, and they recommend measures to reduce the ignitability of structures. A local CWPP is one of the most effective ways to influence where and how state and federal agencies can help implement or fund these projects. CWPPs are generally not required by the state or federal government, but a CWPP development or updating can be leveraged to meet multiple local, tribal, regional, state, and federal priorities, grant funding requirements, and it's just a great way to set out a roadmap to improve the wildfire impacts to a community. Next slide. What you can see is an example from the signature page from the Humboldt Del Norte community, the unit fire plan from 2022. Basically, what we look at when we have a CWPP is who are our collaborators. We want this to be a collaborative effort. This isn't one agency kind of dictating what happens. The CWPP is designed to be a two-way dialogue, a two-way communication. So who do we want as our collaborators? We want local government. We want state involvement, specifically your state forest agency, CAL FIRE. We want tribal involvement. We want the local fire department to be involved. We want federal land managers to be involved. And we really want other stakeholders involved, including non-governmental organizations like fire safe councils. And we want a full and robust public participation in this process. Again, this is not a dictate from above. CWPPs should and must be a grassroots effort. There are 3 entities that are required to have signatory agreement on the final product, and that's going to be your local fire department, your local city or county governance, so a city council or board of supervisors, and again, your state forest agency, CAL FIRE. Next slide. CWPPs can address a wide range of issues. They don't have to be all-inclusive. They can be targeted for things like wildfire response, hazard mitigation, community preparedness, structure protection, or all of the above items. CWPPs must be kept current. Generally, they need to be fresher than 5 years, and this is due to changes that occur across the landscape. Fuels grow back, population changes, wildfire has impacts. So we want a CWPP to be representative of the landscape. And one of the things that we're working on right now is developing a CWPP toolkit as a planning tool, as a planning resource for the public, where they can view the creation of those, participate those, and be accessible to the plans that are made. That way the plans don't just sit on a shelf. Those plans are actionable by all involved. Next slide. I'm not going to go into detail on the subcategories for these 8 steps, but I will broadly discuss each step. So the first step is convening the decision makers, basically getting the leadership together, whether it's community leadership, whether it's governmental leadership, getting those key players together and starting to set up that framework. It's involving federal agencies, and it can be a wide range of federal agencies. The 2 biggest ones that we think of are the Forest Service and BLM, but depending where you are, it can be a host of other agencies, whether it's national parks, whether it's Bureau of Land, the Bureau of Reclamation, just making sure that all those federal agencies that are within that landscape are involved. Step 3 is engaging all interested parties, public, NGOs, nonprofits, everybody that can be affected by wildfire, that their inclusion is welcomed. 4th is to establish a community base map, basically a starting point. 5th is developing those community risk assessments. Again, the difference between hazard and risk. Hazard is knowing that a damaging event could occur or where it might occur. And risk is dealing with things like the damage from that event. Next slide. So now that we've got a base map, now that we understand the hazard, now that we understand the risk, it's establishing those community priorities and recommendations. Again, this is a collaborative document. It's a collaborative work effort with all the key players involved. Building off of that, developing an action plan and assessing that action, and then finalizing that as a community wildfire protection plan, and then recirculating back to step 1 as that plan is implemented, actions are taken, impacts are felt on the landscape, and then refreshing that as the need occurs. Throughout this process, and I think I'll be on one of the last slides here. Next slide, please. Throughout the process, this is a both a top-down framework, but a bottom-up process. So we have those overarching frameworks, statewide, all agencies, all departments, with the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Action Plan. We have a CAL FIRE specific, Board of Forestry specific strategic plan. That strategic plan drives the CAL FIRE unit plans. Those are updated annually. Those are public documents. And then finally, at an individual community level, those plans are available to be developed and to be built off of. And I think that brings us to our next slide, which is the opportunity to ask questions. Kara, I'll let you kind of steer this process, and I'll be available to answer any questions that might come up.
Perfect. Thank you, Chief. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to use the raise hand feature and I will unmute you. You have about 6 minutes to go.
Chief Witt, we have a question from chat. Larry Williams from Ventura wants to know, for contract counties, do they sign as CAL FIRE?
So they are CAL FIRE's agent for that contract county. That's probably a little bit in the weeds for this call, but every contract county has an administrative unit. Those two should be on the same page, and in every instance that I've seen are.
Thank you. And I did see one hand go up and it went down pretty quickly. So if you want to re-raise your hand, that would be fantastic. Okay, we'll give it a couple more seconds.
You know, and while we're waiting, Carol, what I would like you to do is scroll up to maybe the 7th or 8th slide. It was the slide that shows the state, and it shows all of the different units. And I had an arrow pointing to both. There we go. Mendocino and Sonoma Lake Napa. So the comment that came out of Ventura County, we've got 6 counties that are considered contract counties, defined by Public Resource Code. Those are counties where the county fire department has raised their hand and said, we will be the CAL FIRE agent for those counties. That is Marin County in Northern California, and then Santa Barbara County, Ventura County, Los Angeles County, Kern County, and Orange County. And all of those counties follow the exact same rules and roles that CAL FIRE fills statewide. And if you want to scroll back down to the questions page, I'll just reemphasize the QR code that you'll see there takes you to the pre-fire planning web page within the Fire Marshal's office. There you'll find the link to the state strategic fire plan. You'll find the link to your own individual unit fire plan. And again, probably one of the single most important things that the public can do on this call is know who your local CAL FIRE battalion chief is. That's your single best resource to creating that great relationship.
And I do see one hand up. Larry Williams, go ahead.
Good morning, Chief. Just want clarification in regards to contract counties, because I know we do report to a CAL FIRE administrative unit, but for all purposes, and we do work with them, but for what we want to see on the document, because we have probably half a dozen plus CWPPs currently in progress right now throughout our jurisdiction, is to verify that one, we are the local fire department, but as the CAL FIRE agent, when we're dealing with the SRA areas and stuff, that we also can sign that, and we're not having to go also include a San Luis Obispo, San Luis unit signature on there.
Yeah, the assumption is, of course, that it's meeting the intent of all of CAL FIRE activities and policies and processes, and we can absolutely have a talk offline just to make sure everything's in alignment there.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Seeing no further questions, I will go ahead and advance to more information about our upcoming webinars. Thank you, Chief Witt, for the wonderful presentation. We will be holding our next webinar on April 10th, and it will feature information on a summary of the 2022 fires in the Red Book. So please join us if you can. And all of the information from today will be posted on that website link that is in the chat right now. But if there are no further questions, it is 11:58 currently, and we will go ahead and stop this webinar. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and stay safe out there.